So welcome everyone to the South Florida Poetry Journal's reading series for June. We have a really special program tonight, and we just want to welcome all of you to join us if you're reading or if you're listening. I want to give a special welcome to the students from Palm Beach State College who are here. I'm glad you're here to hear some poetry. And I would also like to introduce our South Florida Poetry Journal staff. We have with us Lena de la Rocca, who's the founding editor of South Florida Poetry Journal, affectionately known as SoFloPoJo. And we also have Michael McInerney, who is the editor and publisher of SoFloPoJo and the SoFloPoJo Press. We are delighted to have them here as always. And we're all grateful to the poets who've joined us tonight, who are going to give us a very, very special reading about the Convergence anthology. So let's get going. I can't wait for this. I'm going to introduce JC Todd, and then she's going to take the program from here for the rest of the evening till the open mic. JC Todd is co-editor of Convergence, Poetry on Environmental Impacts of War. She's the author of 6 books of poetry, most recently Beyond Repair, a runner-up for the 2019 Able Muse Poetry Book Award, and the bilingual English-Lithuanian New and Selected What Kept Me Awake, published by PDR Press in 2024. Her poems have appeared widely, including in the Paris Review, Prairie Schooner, One Art, and Virginia Quarterly Review. She has received fellowships from the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage, Leeway Foundation, Pennsylvania Council of the Arts, and artist residency programs. Awards include the 2016 Rita Dove Poetry Prize from the International Writing Center. She has taught in the creative writing program at Bryn Mawr College and the MFA program at Rosemont College, which is a fantastic program. And she lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Thank you very much, JC, for engineering this spectacular night. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Judy. I wanted to say to everybody that Judy and I met online during a reading for the Palm Beach Poets, which I just signed in on and read in the open. And then later I read for that reading, and we've had other things together. So I like the history of that. I like the whole idea of poetry communities that go beyond state and nation. And in fact, Convergence is such a community. Thank you so much. So the link for this anthology to order it will be or is in the chat, and you can check that out at various times. I won't say more than that, except later on I'll remind you to look for the link too. So Poetry on Environmental Impacts of War is an anthology of poems that focuses on the damages to the earth by war. As one of the editors, I welcome you to this reading hosted by Judy for the South Florida Poetry Journal, and we're so pleased to read for you. I want to mention the 2 other editors, Anne Coray and Teresa Chuc. This book would not exist without them. When I was working on Beyond Repair, which is a collection of poems about the impact of war on women, civilians, and combatants, and children of and grandchildren of, I had at one point I thought, well, gee, what about Mother Earth? But I don't have the skills to do an anthology. But when I met Anne and then Teresa, they did, and together we put this together. So I mentioned the collaboration because I think collaboration is the road to peace. And obviously this book is looking at the other end of that road. I'll give you a short tour. The book has 2 forewords, one on poetry and one on the global consequences of war. There are 90 poems by 61 poets, and each poem's followed by an author's note that reveals the history, the science, or personal experience embedded in the poem. The author's notes seem to me to be a kind of reality anchor, and the poems a kind of way that we can feel disaster without maybe flinching too hard away from it. The subject is war's environmental degradation on 6 continents and the moon. The poems address degradation, but they also affirm nature's resilience and regeneration. So if this seems contradictory to you, well, where there's despair, there's hope. And we want both to be in the book so we can persevere. So, what distinguishes these poems from other eco poetry on war? All of the poems center on the soil, the waters, the atmosphere, the plants, and the creatures of Earth. And they decenter the human, but do not exclude human life because you can't. As naturalist Anne McCrary Sullivan writes, this central principle of ecology is that Earth and all its beings, including us, are interconnected and interdependent. All our relations are reciprocal. Why poetry? Well, poetry asks us to pay attention and to participate in making meaning and to feel as well as think and see beyond our species and confront how the earth itself is harmed by the human activities. I want to mention two sections, and then we'll get to the poets. One is Engage, and it's a series of prompts and discussions, questions for adults and teens. You can think of it as educational, and I guess it is, but it's to encourage everyone who reads to do more than read, to really connect with the material. And so maybe there are little assists or prompts for doing that. And the second section is written by Rick Steiner or prepared by Rick Steiner. It's called Tallying the Costs, and it summarizes the major types of environmental trauma caused by war. It's many pages long. And Rick Steiner is a conservation biologist who consults with governments, NGOs, the UN on the impacts of violence and armed conflict. I want to say that the extent of the damages in this section is really stunning. I hadn't realized, I don't know how I could not have realized, but I hadn't realized the extent. So tonight we're going to hear poems by Özge, Lisa Couturier, James Janko, Jillian Sullivan, Vernita Hall, and Brian Turner. And their poems confront these damages and bring them to light so that you can feel the impact on the planet. You'll also hear moments of human reparation and of nature regenerating. It's our hope that tonight's poetry will rouse your awareness about what we, the humans, have done to our earth, and that you'll take some action to protect our planet, and that perhaps we'll stop thinking of ourselves as the apex species. I'll begin with a poem of my own that takes this mix of destruction and regeneration. It's called The Silk Road and the Scythe. Now, the Silk Road has facilitated economic, cultural, political, and religious interaction between the East and the West for millennia. Where it runs at the foot of the Himalayas in Kashmir, the border between Muslim Pakistan and Hindu India, is a site of armed conflict, on and off, on and off, on and off. And when it's off, the orchards, the fields of amaranths begin to regenerate. The people have food, life goes back to whatever the normal is, and then another conflict. And this has been going on, documented for centuries. But of course, I think it's really being felt right now in ways that are very public. The Silk Road and the Scythe. Well, I lost my place. Here it is. The Silk Road and the Scythe. Beyond the tumbled red marble of temple, pavilion, and palace. Beyond the skeleton of a heronry once blazoned with plumed crest and wing. beyond the woman's bathhouse, roofless, its corridors busied with bloom, is a vast commonplace orchard, apples rotting in amaranth's bronze. After the scythe passed through, vegetable ruin, seeds gone wild so long they resist cultivation, the tangly end of an era of elaboration, epic and sugary before it fell. Peshawar, Lahore, Kashmir, Shalimar. Amid the glamour of dominion and the spangle of arms, that ascetic, the scythe, blue and notched as if counting with a stroke so severe it is tender, takes down to the root the theatrical side of mankind. In its swath, someone will glean the remains, a few grains too scant for even half a loaf. If she can muster the spit, maybe enough for a palm's breadth of flatbread, maybe a pasty gruel. So I would like to pass the wand reading to Lena. So Lena's poems have been published around the globe, including in the UK, the US, Canada, Iceland, Serbia, France. Her poetry has been shortlisted for international poetry competitions, including the Oxford Brookes International Poetry Competition, that was 2021, the Plough Poetry Prize, that was 2023, and most recently, the Black Cat Poetry Press Nature Prize. So that's the brief bio that's in Convergence for Lena. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, JC. Thanks. Okay, good evening, everyone. And it's really fabulous to be a part of such a great and urgent anthology. Tonight, I'm going to read a persona poem. The voice speaking in this poem belongs to an ancient, more than human being, the marabou stork. For those unfamiliar with the marabou, it's a massive, wading carrion bird native to parts of Africa and Asia. In the West, this bird is often misunderstood, labeled as hideous or a nightmare bird because of its naked neck and predatory look. But ecologically, it's of vital importance as a carrion feeder because it cleans up decaying remains, saving entire ecosystems from plagues. Yet, what happens to this bird when its habitat becomes a war zone? My poem is about the recent catastrophe of the Tigray War in Ethiopia, a region that was once a global model for community-led land restoration before it was torn apart by 2 years of intense war. Then, if it could talk, what would this bird of war tell us about our brutality? Here, in my poem, is the marabou stork answering. Undertaker. They call me hideous, they call me ugly, but they are too blind to see how wild I am, how free, how gloriously gritty my naked neck is, how spicily the ash pink of my sack pulses, how mighty my claws are. They love to call me an undertaker because I devour the corpses of their wars to save them from plagues. But they still call me a nightmare bird, as if their sleep can ever be as cataclysmic as the city of Tigray, where I watch from a sky that they love to stain with bombardments, explosions, missiles, poisons, Yet they dare to call me disgusting, not even realizing how elegantly my cloak unfurls, how lustrously I float over those featherless legged beings, poor wingless things, hiding under ragged fabrics. They chirp nonsense noises as they point metal sticks at me. Explosions in my beautiful body. In her poem, Every Day, the Austrian poet Ingeborg Bachmann wrote a line that exposes the psychological climate of our modern world. War is no longer declared, only continued. The monstrous has become everyday. We live in an era where this monstrosity has become our daily background noise. But we still tend to believe that we, human beings, are superior, as if the entire planet revolves around us, as if there is no interconnectedness, no ecosystems tying our breath to other living beings and non-living things, as if we have not declared war after war, not destroyed natural habitats as in Tigray, decimating biodiversity, wildlife, forests, water, the earth, and even the air, as if we are not causing mass destruction, leading to the mass extinction of species, as if we have not poisoned the planet, and meanwhile, we have not killed each other for land, power, or money. We still tend to believe that we are sovereign. Within my own theoretical framework, catapoetics, I define our century as the Catastrophene, an age of intertwined catastrophes where war zones, ecological loss, industrial and technological violence, wildlife extinction, and cultural erasure are no longer separate threats, but they are inseparable filaments, entangled into each other. The bombardment of a city is the ravage of the soil. The destruction of human life is the silencing of the more than human world. That is why kata poetry explores the world through countless eyes, voices, angles, and through many colliding catastrophes happening all at once. Still, here we are, speaking from a single perspective of the human being. And despite all of these, we still look at the scavenger, the predator, the wild, and tend to believe it's animals that are the monsters, not us. Yet then, who is the everyday monster? Who eats the flesh of this world? Is it the marabou stork of Tigray? Or is it us? Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Lena, for the poem and also for the context of the poem that you discuss after it. It's very compelling. Thank you.
You are very welcome.
Next, we'll hear from Lisa Couturier, and she lives with her horses, crows, and vultures in the countryside of Maryland. She's an award-winning essayist and poet, the author of The Hopes of Snakes, published by Beacon Press, and The Animals/Bodies by Finishing Line. She's a writer with the Soul Family collection in literature, community, and the natural world. Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you, JC and Judy Ireland and the South Florida Poetry Journal for having me here tonight. My poem, Standing with My Horses in My Fields in Maryland, was inspired by my 6 horses well, 5 now, 6 when I wrote the poem, who live in Maryland on land and in fields where the Civil War horses once ran. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about horses before we go into the poem, because I don't want there to be any confusion how deeply the horses of the Civil War suffered. And part of that is because I've lived in the horse world for so long. Wendell might agree with me on the suffering of horses. And today is in many ways is endemic, their suffering as it was during the Civil War. Perhaps some of you heard recently about the recent collapse and death of a carriage horse in New York City on June 9th. Or you're aware of the consistently tragic events that happen to race horses on the racetrack. As a horse person, I'm consistently attuned to the lives of these magnificent and deeply emotional creatures and see many things that are hard to see, which is difficult to carry or hold all of that. Which is why, honestly, I did not want to write this poem because looking into that and into the research can be very difficult. But it's also why I knew I must write this poem, because it was the least I could do for horses, those of the past and those of today, which is to tell their truth, which is that horses are not brave. They are not brave in the way that we understand that word and the way that they are always referred to as war horses or as race horses. As a prey species, a horse's dominant emotion is fear, and they stay together whether running into battle or running on the racetrack to help them manage their panic and to stay alive. We take advantage of that fear. We use it to win our wars, and we use it still today to line our pockets at the track. I also want to let you know that the poem is based on research that I felt I should ground the experiences of soldiers, horses, mules, and ponies in. To that end, I have used quotes from Civil War soldiers and generals that I found in letters and journals that they wrote and kept. So when you hear me lower my voice to sound like a man's voice, you will know that those lines are from the men's letters and journals. So I'll go now to my poem, Standing with My Horses in My Fields in Maryland. Standing with my horses in my fields in Maryland, I stand with the horses of the Civil War, who cantered across these grasses that stitched together men's fields of fighting, horses who carried the cavalry, artillery, wounded soldiers, and supplies. I stand with every ghost horse of the Civil War, whose extraordinary panoramic vision meant he saw, all around him, all at once, the 350 degrees of danger. He did not flee alone because horses remained together, regardless, languishing, while their sensitive ears, scented with earth and sweat, could hear, over 2 miles in the distance, the terrible grumble and rumble and roar. The battle was on once more, as a poet wrote about General Sheridan's ride on his black horse Winchester, a steed who swept on with his wild eyes full of fire, and survived far longer than the 1.5 million or more horses, mules, and ponies who perished under my southern skies, that at sunset and sunrise blushed pink and red like the fresh torn flesh of horse or human. Private Ezra E. Stickley lost his horse at Antietam. The third shell struck and killed my horse, and bursting blew him to pieces, knocked me down, of course, and tore off my right arm. I stand with the ghosts of equines who, diseased with glanders, died from abscessed and ulcerated lungs, equines whose saddles and harnesses never fit their bony bodies, covered in infected sores, horses who were hungry, thirsty, listless, who, as one Union general observed, were destroyed by the soldiers' hard and unnecessary riding. Horses' cracked hooves sunk in muddy creeks they slurped from when men lowered their reins long enough for anything alive to close its eyes in the weather of war that hung over these valleys where I stand with my horses, where wind howls all day across the foothills of the Appalachians, across the bodies of the mules who pulled carriages carrying cannons for miles until, utterly drained, they dropped, only to be shot. A captain in a Massachusetts cavalry wrote to his mother about horses. You have no idea of their sufferings. I do the best I can, but all war is cruel. So I have one rule. A horse must go until he can't be spurred any further. And then the rider must get another horse as soon as he can seize one. Out of the forgotten millions, some were storied. Robert E. Lee's Traveler, Stonewall Jackson's Little Sorrel, Ulysses Grant's Cincinnati, Philip Sheridan's Winchester. As for the rest, shoot the horses, men commonly called out, and heaped with pain, horses collapsed. The number was high, said a general. They lay, like the men, in all attitudes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you so much for reading it in a way that we could really hear the quotations against your ruminations and thoughts about them. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from James Janko, whose novels and short stories have won numerous awards. His fourth novel, The Wire Walker, was published in the fall of 2025 by Regal House, a woman-owned press. Four Windows Press published his debut book of poetry titled Love and Catastrophe in 2023. Thank you, James, for joining us.
Thank you, JC. Thank you, Judy. Really honored to be here with all of you. I want to tell you a little bit about my own history to set the context for my poetry. I was drafted into the Vietnam War, which the Vietnamese call the American War. And I was assigned to be a combat medic in an infantry battalion commanded by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer III. My unit operated in areas where resistance forces often disappeared into tunnels. So if we couldn't find the Vietnamese, our so-called enemy, our superiors called in the Air Force to destroy all that might conceal or sustain the enemy. So planes bombed rice paddies, forests, fields, rivers, sometimes villages, and defoliated huge tracts of land with Agent Blue and other herbicides. It didn't take me long to realize we're fighting the earth, the entire Vietnamese landscape. If we couldn't find the Vietnamese, we could, and we did destroy their land. The first poem that I'll read, titled Late Night Scribble in Margins of Unpaid Bill, describes a basic military strategy: defeat the opposition by defeating the earth. One day in Chuc, knee-deep in patty mush, booby trap, white flash, shards of leg, medic tying tourniquet, and hours later, revenge, bombs and napalm, fields and huts ablaze, no rice grass anymore, no coconut palms, no jackfruit or tamarind, no dragon fruit trees. This is the moon. GIs on patrol days later. Leave Coca-Cola in dying village. Show goodwill, win hearts and minds of ghosts. Recipe for war, same during my time here. Light the earth, shake and bake. There is a saying in Southeast Asia, ants suffer when elephants rage. I'm going to read a poem by Teresa Chuc, one of the editors of the anthology. And she also describes this basic military strategy: defeat the opposition by defeating the earth, in her poem Agent Blue. This poem is about the use of herbicides in South Vietnam during the war. About 1 million acres of rice paddies and mangrove forests were sprayed with defoliants in an attempt to win the war by destroying the people's food supply, mainly rice. Herbicides such as Agent Blue remain in the soils, the sediments, and the waters for many years. I gave away one of my medals, my combat medical badge, to a Vietnamese woman, Tran Thi Nguyen, who was born without legs due to her mother's exposure to Agent Orange. Now, Nguyen was born in 1985, quite a few years after the war. So here's Teresa's poem, Agent Blue. To kill correctly takes calculation, down to a science. Arsenic, cacodyllic acid, no water and rice on a cellular level. Make sure no surviving seed can be collected and planted, because even a small seed assures survival, because mortars, grenades, and bombs cannot destroy a grain. Because our heart is made of seeds, know what it takes to kill the seeds. Know what it takes to deprive the plant of water, to dehydrate it, to be surrounded by love, but unable to absorb it, to be surrounded by love, but unable to absorb it. I want to close with a short poem of mine that's in the book, really a child's poem. And this one takes place in Couturier also. And it's titled In an Unbombed Village 9 kilometers away. A girl kneels in a garden, rescues a grasshopper from a puddle. Hop, hop, gone. And joy shakes her awake as geese fly under the moon. So in the middle of a war, a child saves the life of a grasshopper. I did not see this happen. I imagined the girl, the garden, the grasshopper, the puddle, the geese flying under the moon. Yes, I imagined this poem, every detail, but the girl's compassion and joy align with the web of knowledge that sustains all our lives. Is there not always some being to assist or to celebrate, someone with whom to consciously share the precious gift of life? Thank you.
Thank you so much, James, for your reading and for your reading of Teresa's poem as well. It's interesting, and I think maybe a sign of some of the thoughts that the poets were having when they contributed the poems or wrote the poems. There's many interlocking moments in this book, not necessarily next to each other because the book is arranged chronologically, but the themes interlock. And I really appreciate your reading Teresa's poem as well as yours. Now we'll hear from Jillian Sullivan in Australia tonight. Jillian's, I met Jillian here in Philadelphia when she taught in a special summer program for the MFA at Rosemont when I was teaching there too. Jillian has 13 published books. They include creative nonfiction, novels, short story collections, and poetry. Her American honors include a Juncture Memoir Award and Highlights Fiction Award. She is an earth plasterer, an environmentalist, and a grandmother. Her latest book is Map for the Heart, Ida Valley Essays from Otago University Press. Jillian.
Kia ora. Thank you, JC, and also Judy, and welcome to everyone who's listening. So I'm a New Zealand poet and currently reading from Hobart in Tasmania. So this is an introduction to my poem. In 1976, I lived in the suburb of Paratutu in New Plymouth, New Zealand. And rumours still abide that Ivan Watkins Dow chemical factory there helped supply the defoliant Agent Orange for use in the Vietnam War. A former top official at the factory and a former MP both reported that they had evidence that the Dow plant in New Zealand made and exported the chemicals for Agent Orange. So Agent Orange is made of two ingredients, 2,4,5-T and 2,4-D, 50% each. And both of these chemicals were produced at the Paratutu factory during the Vietnam War years. Around 11 million gallons were sprayed over vast areas of forests and swamps to eliminate coverage and shelter, and over agricultural land to destroy crops that fed the population, as we've just heard in those really moving poems. The toxic after effects are still felt in generations of people and will be felt in the soil for decades. And then the surplus dioxin-laden herbicide was also sprayed across New Zealand farms and land. So this is my poem. The poem is called Dioxin Levels Detected. Dioxin levels detected in Paratutu residents up to 5 times New Zealand's levels, second only to South Vietnam. When we lived in Paratutu, that city by the sea in the Ngā Sugarloaf Islands, we heard about Agent Orange, walked past Ivan Watkins Dow chemical factory. Was 2,4,5-T and 2,4-D shipped from the Taranaki wharves, as was said, to the US base at Subic Bay, our agricultural defoliant, our scrub desiccant, Dow's dioxin-laden herbicide sprayed over rainforest, jungle, mangrove, into wetlands, marshes, leaves, particles of clay. 100,000 hectares no longer naturally regenerates. An ad in the Sunday paper read, "Did you live in Paratutu between 1962 and 1987? When I click on the link, leukemia, spina bifida, then diabetes, our child from the age of 4. Our young married saunter through those streets, our footprints in the sugared dust, the air alive with treason." Thank you. And I'm just going to read a poem also from the poet John Balaban. John was a conscious objector to the Vietnam War. He was volunteering as a teacher at a university in the Mekong Delta when he was wounded by shrapnel during the Tet Offensive of 1968. Following that, he worked for a medical group that treated war-injured children traveling into countrysides of overwhelming tropical beauty to confer with their families out in the farming villages, and also always aware that napalm, white phosphorus, explosives, gunfire, 2,4,5-T defoliants, and landmines were wounding children near their homes, and that some of those munitions and defoliants would be around for years to come. This is John's poem, Crossing on the Mekong Ferry, reading The New Yorker. Under the drilling sun, puttering past mud-tied mangrove swamps, the glossy cover struck my eye with its bursting yellow blossoms and grapevine leaves, nasturtiums or pumpkin flowers, like those twining in tangles by our college back in Pennsylvania. Inside, another article by Thomas Whiteside, 245T, Teratogenicity in Births, South Vietnam, 1/7 defoliated, residue in rivers, rice, and mother's milk. With a scientific turn of mind, I can understand that malformations in lab mice may not occur in children, but when, last week, I ushered 3 hair-lipped, tusk-toothed toddlers to surgeries in Saigon, I wondered, what did they drink that I have drunk? What dioxin, percorum, or arsenic have knitted in my cells, or in my wife, now carrying our first child? Pigs were squealing in a ferry truck. Through the slats, I saw one lather the foam in its mouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jillian. And thank you for reading John Balaban's poem. Again, a dovetail, 2 different continents, but there we are. I'd like to introduce Vernita Hall next. Vernita is a Philadelphian, and she is the author of Where William Walked, Poems about Philadelphia and its People of Color. This book won the Willow Book Grand Prize and the Robert Creeley Award. Her poems have appeared in Poetry, the American Poetry Review, African American Review, Barrow Street, Solstice, The Common, River Styx Magazine, Arts and Letters, and I will just say many, many more publications. Welcome, Vernita. We look forward to listening to you.
Thanks, JC. Evening, everybody. It is a privilege to be sharing in this gathering. A baby is born. What's the first thing the older women do after they count the fingers and the toes? They ask, who does the child look like? Does he look like us or she? Family resemblances. It's a stamp of belonging, the genetic imprint that gets passed down. But because of civil war in Mozambique, the genetic heritage of elephants was changed massively within 15 years because they were slaughtering elephants with tusks for ivory to fund the war. So within only 15 years, the birth rate of female elephants born without tusks in Gorongosa National Park shot from 18% to 51%. That's dramatic human-caused genetic engineering in less than 1 generation. Now, governments burn stockpiles of ivory to protect elephants. We don't crush blood diamonds. We don't burn pearls. To me, burning ivory seems like a horrible sacrilege. Tusks are not just magnificent and beautiful. Ivory is not just beautiful. Tusks evolved as essential survival tools. And what will be the impact on future generations on these elephants' ability to thrive? I wrote this persona poem as a conversation in a form called a shadorma. I call it lament. Beautiful daughter, curse our bones. So dear, men have slayed us for 2 teeth, their white treasure. Only you survived, last of 9 I bore, tusk deprived, lone cripple of our tribe. Was nakedness your shield, your handicap a gift? Savannah, grassland paradise, killing fields, lost Eden, elephantine epitaph, death hides every when. Mother, they burned your holy bones. Slaughter or sacrilege? Curse this Hobson's choice, devil's bargain for our lives. Mother, See my toothless children, your glory gone. I give birth all mutants. Damn all men. Curse my ugliness. Survivor trees are trees that have endured disastrous events to become symbols of hope. They have outlasted disasters, both natural and man-made, hurricanes, mudslides, school shootings, bombs. The witness trees in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, that absorbed thousands of bullets during the Civil War. An American elm rescued after the Oklahoma City bombing. After 9/11, a pear tree was pulled from the rubble of the Twin Towers and replanted. Trees in Japan that survived atomic bomb blasts were called the Hibaku Jumoku. Mary Beth Hallman wrote about one of them, a ginkgo planted in 1740, one of 7 that survived the Hiroshima bombing. Chuc is the name of the garden where the tree currently lives, and her powerful persona poem is titled Chuc and Ginkgo Speaks, a Haibun. When the black rains end, when the bloodless bodies are buried in earth, when the poisons filter down into the dark and fertile soil, when the troops turn to stone, we will still be here. We who withstood heat 40 times stronger than the sun, who have existed since before the dinosaurs, who you call living fossils, oldest of trees, last of our kind. We who budded new green fists within the year of your blast, remain. You who once saved our kind, who value our tenacity to grow in your concrete worlds and clean your sooted air, who still lean against our trunks and dream what you could be. You and we are linked in our survival. We will not forsake you. We draw power from deeper than you bury your war horses, deeper than your shrapnel will ever lodge. We stand undeterred by our many wounds, phoenixed from the ashes of your fears, phlegm finding roots to rise around charred trunks and blasted limbs. Listen, we speak to you of endurance, voices in concert with winds. We remind you that only in coexistence will you survive. We tell you that your suffering arises from your confusion over superiority. Superiority is always with those who branch broader into multiplicity. Listen, venerate these charred trunks. See how our golden halo falls within a day to create a mirror halo at our feet, where all power resides. All life waits for you to surrender to our embrace. When the black rains end, beneath burns, spring's green fists hold fall's golden halo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vernita, for reading your poem and a companion poem, Elephant to Tree, by Mary Beth Hollerman. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Brian Turner. Brian has published a memoir, My Life as a Foreign Country. It was published by Norton and also by Penguin Random House in the UK. And there are at least 4 or 5 versions of it with different covers on the internet. He's published 5 collections of poetry, including his first Here Bullet and Dead Peasant's Handbook, both by Alice James Books. He's the co-editor of Kiss, and he's the editor of Kiss and the co-editor of The Strangest of Theaters. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a joy to be with you all, even in the difficulty that we're all sharing and the meditations that are here. It's great to hear these other voices of poets like John Balaban and others too, and the Haibun we just heard as well. Thank you for that. I guess I'm sort of like the caboose's lament, the last part of the train coming in, but I know JC Todd is going to come back in to wrap things up, and hopefully we'll hear another poem from her. I'm not sure if that'll happen, but I'll start with there's an author's note, and thankfully there's an editor's note. I think they work well together. The author's note for the poem that I've written begins: militaries train and prepare for war and conflict, whether actively engaged in a war or not. Within the environmental spaces where this training takes place, nature often pays a price for these training exercises, and the destruction and pain and death visited upon aquatic life has been well documented over the decades. In particular, the use of sonar pulses by submarines has led to the beaching of whales and dolphins as they attempt to escape. My poem, Cuvier's Beaked Whales, explores this and considers how the experience might be perceived by the whales themselves. The editor's note is, in 2018, a Newsweek article reports that at least 43 Cuvier's beaked whales washed ashore across 5 western Scottish islands in just over 1 month. An increase in Russian and Chinese submarine activity may be to blame, but international waters could involve a number of navies. A few years later, and on the other side of the world, a 2021 piece in The Guardian mentioned a study in the Marianas that counted at least 10 whales who were stranded between 2006 and 2019, and is believed that many more die at sea due to Navy sonar. The Mariana Islands, made up of a U.S. territory and a U.S. Commonwealth, are surrounded by the U.S. military's Mariana Islands Training and Testing Study Area. And so the poem, Cuvier's Beaked Whales. They hunt the deep for glass squid and giant grenadier fish, ray-finned smelts and lanternfish, plunging almost 10,000 feet, their breath held for over 2 hours at a time. And as they sink, they wave their flukes goodbye, something like the way you and I used to drift off to sleep each night, our mouths opening in the blue dark. What these whales cannot comprehend, or comprehend all too well, the acoustic blasts of active sonar, submarines probing from 1 to 10 kilohertz. In the open ocean, it's a sound of hunger, cold, metallic, predatory. Unlike humans, they listen through their throats, with sound waves traveling through channels of fatty tissue before entering their bony ears. And when the Navy pulses its sonar, panic triggers within the whales, a panic that drives them into the abyss or to the shore, their ascent bringing on decompression, the bends, gas bubbles of nitrogen accumulating in their veins, internal vessels hemorrhaging in bronchopulmonary shock, their bodies disrupted at the cellular level, the spinal cord crackling with a searing, unrelenting pain. And this is what spirits them to beach themselves on the shores of an unlivable world, where they are bewildered, undone beyond any reckoning, each animal suffocating as seagulls circle above, the flukes and fins of these whales no longer of any use, as the last watery film evaporates from their highly sensitive skin, each whale changing hue as if turning to shadow. Waves of sound muted within them as this airy medium weighs them down, their throats unable to amplify the strange figures on approach, those with otherworldly voices that register only at a faint decibel, with tones so low and hushed and laden with dread as they whisper and kneel before the whales, touching each whale with such delicate palms, with such tenderness, their fingertips tracing the map of scars inscribed on the whales as if reciting the whales' lives back to them one last time before the lights of this world extinguish, one after another, after another, after another, after another. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. And yes, I will return with the final poem. I want to end on a note of regeneration and reparation, and a note that also indicates that, at least from my point of view, there is no dominant species. When we're talking war, we do have war makers, but I think humans now must shift the perspective to being one of the many, one
Definitely.
who maybe has some access to stop, to slow, to change, to think differently about both the human role and what the human will do to maintain the earth, not as an adversary and not as an economy for itself, for all the creatures, the beings who live on it. I was in Germany for about a month in a very small town, Wippersdorf, south of Berlin. Wippersdorf had been a site of where the Soviets constructed underground missile sites aimed at various points in Europe. And because of the devastation of the land as a result of that war, there also had been a lot of planting of reforesting, with a small select number of trees planted in a grid. We know now that that kind of planting limits biodiversity, but it was a good cover for the missiles. I was there when this town, this area had switched over to being in West Germany, or Germany by that point. And every day I walked up around dusk, I walked the old Salt and Troop Road, which was a road centuries old. It was being used in the 1100s to transport salt, and which was valuable, so it was guarded by troops throughout, and transport other goods, even from Roman territories toward the Baltic Sea and back. When I walked it, it was just a hard-packed trail. But I did notice, or was told actually, that the javelina, the gray-headed squirrel, the gray-headed woodpecker, and the red fox, which I saw rarely, had once been abundant in that area. So that was another sign of the decrease in biodiversity. I had a lot of time to consider this and to consider my place in it. I
Yes, that
consider the human in a field west of the old Salt and Troop Road in the former GDR. Woodpecker is knocking, working the bare oak, head weight driving its bill without mercy. That so human idea of gentle kindness, we hope it will arise, descend, somehow make what's harsh mild. The oak has little to yield. One cache of savory flicks, and it's knock, knock, knock again, further up where the limb grays and gnarls, the bird towing to twig end. Hop, and it's off toward pines. Wing whir overtaking quiet air. White streak of back absorbed by the dim. Twilight. I've been lost in a bird. Skies gone liquid at horizon, almost neon red. Such beauty. Another so human notion. One I've put my foolish, also human, faith in. Neither can bandage pain or knit the ragged edges of a wound. Just now there's nothing here of human suffering except the road. Hard as a salt rub scar, tramped into the edge of this field, by the hooves and boots that crushed grasses eastward against the sun's course for hundreds of years. The mallards clack and whistle lift me from my mind into the mist that my breath draws in, the mist that merges me into the field. And overhead, the moon, huge in a corona pellucid as the gel that wrapped the cell where I began dividing into human, pellucid as the yolk where the cells divided into bird. We too now, and the dead and living all around and under us, which we cannot see, held together, whole in our divisions, by the mist, the dark, the moon's non-human glow. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to the readers, Lena, Lisa, James, Jillian, Vernita, and Brian. What a marvelous reading. And interestingly, a reading which, though heavy in fact and observation, was still the poetry ascended from it. Just marvelous. Thank you all so much. And Judy, thank you, and thanks South Florida Poetry Journal for giving us this opportunity to share these poems in the voices of the poets. We appreciate it. And everyone who's here tonight listening, or maybe not night where you are, everyone who's here now listening, I want to just urge you to think of yourselves not as a predator species, but as an equal to all species, all beings on Earth. Maybe we can move an inch, a nano inch forward. Thank you all so very much.